The moment the door opened, Rowan Mercer forgot how to breathe. 15 years of silence. 15 years of regret. 15 years of wondering whether he had destroyed the greatest thing that had ever happened to him. And now she stood there. The same eyes. The same gentle face. The same woman he had promised to marry before he walked away from their small town and disappeared into a future neither of them could have imagined. Except now there were traces of sorrow where laughter once lived. And for a few terrifying seconds, neither of them moved. If you believe kindness deserves a second chance and that some promises never truly die, take a moment to like this video, comment where you're watching from, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Ancient Truth for more emotional stories that stay with you long after they end. Rowan had spent 15 years imagining this moment. In some versions, Seraphina slammed the door. In others, she pretended not to recognize him. Sometimes she was married. Sometimes she hated him. Sometimes she had forgotten him completely. But never, not once, had he imagined seeing tears forming in her eyes before either of them spoke. The sight shattered him. 15 years earlier, Rowan had been a young man with impossible dreams and empty pockets. He grew up in a town where everyone expected life to remain the same forever. People married young. Worked local jobs. Raised families. And rarely left. But Rowan carried a restless heart. He wanted more. Not because he disliked his hometown. Because he feared spending his entire life wondering what might have been. The only thing harder than leaving was leaving Seraphina behind. They had met as teenagers. She was the kind of person who made every room feel warmer. The kind of person who remembered birthdays nobody else remembered. The kind of person who stayed after school to help struggling students. The kind of person who saw goodness in people even when they couldn't see it themselves. By the time they were 22, everyone assumed they would marry. Including them. On the day before Rowan left town, they spent the afternoon sitting beneath an old oak tree overlooking the river. The future felt enormous and frightening. But love made everything seem possible. Before sunset, Rowan held her hands and made a promise. He promised he would return. He promised he would build a life worthy of them both. And most importantly, he promised he would marry her. Neither of them realized that life was already preparing to test that promise. The first year away was difficult but manageable. They exchanged letters. Then phone calls. Then long conversations about future plans. But dreams often cost more than people expect. Rowan struggled. Jobs failed. Business ventures collapsed. Debt followed him from city to city. Every setback delayed his return. Months became years. Communication became harder. Eventually pride became the real enemy. He hated telling Seraphina about failure after failure. He convinced himself he needed one success before coming home. Just one. One achievement. One victory. One reason to show her he hadn't wasted their future. But years have a way of moving faster than people realize. While Rowan chased opportunities, life continued without him. Then tragedy struck. His father died unexpectedly. The grief sent Rowan spiraling. Instead of returning home, he buried himself deeper into work. Every day he delayed became another reason to delay again. Eventually the distance felt impossible to cross. And silence settled between them. The kind of silence that grows heavier every year. Back in their hometown, Seraphina waited far longer than anyone expected. People encouraged her to move on. Friends introduced her to other men. Family members worried about her future. But she never seemed interested. For years she carried hope. Then hope slowly transformed into acceptance. Not because she stopped loving Rowan. Because she finally believed he wasn't coming back. Time changed both of them. Seraphina became a teacher. She dedicated herself to helping children who felt forgotten. Her kindness touched countless lives. Students remembered her decades later. Parents trusted her completely. Yet despite all the joy she gave others, a small corner of her heart remained untouched. A place nobody else ever reached. Meanwhile, Rowan eventually found success. Ironically, it arrived long after he stopped expecting it. A construction company he helped build expanded rapidly. Investments flourished. Financial security finally appeared. Everything he once believed would make him worthy. But success felt strangely empty. Because the person he had wanted to share it with wasn't there. One rainy afternoon, 15 years after leaving, Rowan found an old photograph hidden inside a storage box. It showed two young people sitting beneath an oak tree beside a river. Both smiling. Both believing life would be simple. The picture broke something inside him. For hours he stared at it. Then he booked a flight. The next morning he began the journey home. As Rowan stood outside Seraphina's house now, rainwater dripped from his jacket. His heart pounded harder than it had during any business deal or professional challenge. Because none of those things truly mattered. Only this did. Only her. Seraphina's hand trembled slightly against the door. She studied his face carefully. Time had left its mark. Gray strands appeared near his temples. Lines framed his eyes. But she recognized him instantly. Some people change. Some connections don't. For several seconds, the world seemed to disappear. The rain. The neighborhood. The passing years. Everything faded. Leaving only two people standing between what was lost and what might still be found. The emotion in Seraphina's eyes wasn't simple. It wasn't happiness. It wasn't anger. It was the overwhelming collision of 15 years' worth of unanswered questions. Why did you leave? Why didn't you come back? Why didn't you write? Did I ever matter? Rowan saw every question without hearing a single word. And for the first time in his life, he stopped searching for excuses. The truth was simple. He had been afraid. Afraid of failure. Afraid of disappointment. Afraid of returning without becoming the man he thought he needed to be. And that fear had cost him 15 years. The realization hurt more than any hardship he had ever endured. They eventually stepped inside. The house felt warm and peaceful. Plants decorated the windows. Books filled the shelves. Photographs covered the walls. Evidence of a life carefully built despite heartbreak. As sunlight filtered through the windows, Rowan noticed something unexpected. A framed photograph. The old oak tree beside the river. The same place where he made his promise. His chest tightened. Some memories had survived. Hours passed as they slowly unraveled the missing years. Not all wounds healed instantly. Some truths were painful. Some silences felt uncomfortable. But honesty finally replaced distance. For the first time in 15 years, neither of them hid behind pride. Rowan spoke openly about his failures. His fears. His regrets. Seraphina shared the loneliness she rarely admitted to anyone. The disappointment. The struggle of letting go. And strangely, the more truth emerged, the lighter everything felt. Because real healing rarely begins with perfection. It begins with honesty. As evening approached, Rowan asked if she would walk with him. Together they followed the familiar path toward the river. The town looked smaller than he remembered. Yet somehow more beautiful. When they reached the oak tree, both stopped. The massive branches still stretched toward the sky. The river still flowed quietly below. Time had changed many things. Not this place. Rowan stared at the ground where two young dreamers once sat planning a future. Then he looked at Seraphina. The woman who had unknowingly remained the center of his heart through every success and every failure. The woman he never truly stopped loving. And suddenly he understood something. Life isn't measured by achievements. Not really. It's measured by people. By moments. By relationships. By the kindness we give and receive. Everything else eventually fades. The sun began lowering across the horizon. Golden light filtered through the leaves. For a moment, it felt as though the years between them disappeared. Not erased. Simply understood. The pain mattered. The mistakes mattered. But they no longer controlled the future. Because forgiveness had quietly entered the space where bitterness could have lived. And forgiveness changes everything. Before we reach the ending, tell us in the comments, have you ever waited for someone longer than you should have because your heart refused to give up on them? The answer might help someone else feel less alone today. As darkness slowly approached, Rowan and Seraphina sat beneath the oak tree once more. Not as the reckless young people they used to be. But as two adults who had survived life. Who had learned difficult lessons. Who understood that love isn't proven by perfect timing. It's proven by what remains after time tests everything. For years Rowan believed he needed wealth, status, and success before returning. But sitting beside Seraphina, he realized she had never wanted those things. She had only wanted him. And Seraphina realized something too. The young man who left had made mistakes. Terrible mistakes. But the man who returned had finally learned what truly mattered. Sometimes life doesn't give people a second chance. Sometimes it does. And when it does, the bravest thing a person can do is accept it. As the stars began appearing above the river, Rowan looked toward the woman he had loved for more than half his life. This time there were no promises about distant futures. No grand declarations. No impossible plans. Only gratitude. Because after 15 years of separation, disappointment, and regret, life had given them one more opportunity to begin again. And sometimes that is the most beautiful gift of all. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Ancient Truth. Your support helps keep these stories alive and allows more people to discover messages of hope, forgiveness, and second chances. Remember this. A promise may be delayed, a dream may be broken, and years may be lost, but kindness and genuine love have a remarkable way of finding their way back home. The end.